Hey everybody, this is Carissa Keister from Stillwater Area Public Schools, home of the ponies, and you are listening to Pony Voices. On this show, we celebrate the amazing people of Stillwater schools and give you an insider's view of what is happening across our district. Not only is our mascot unique, so are our stories. So grab a cup of coffee, get comfy, and settle in for our latest episode. We all recognize that sound. Even if it's been years since we've been in a high school ourselves, we know that when the bell rings, it's time to get up and move. The ringing bell is the signal that directs the life of a high school student. But have you ever stopped to wonder why the bell rings at certain times? Or what would happen if the schedule changed to make the bell ring more or less often? Today we're talking with Stillwater Area High School Principal Rob Bach and teacher Rachel Stile about the power of the bell. We'll discuss how a high school schedule impacts learning by providing more or less opportunities for kids. And we'll hear about the conversation underway to consider making a change to the current high school schedule. So let's get started. Well, welcome, Rob and Rachel. Thanks for joining me today. You have both spent a lot of time at the high school, and you've no doubt heard a lot of ringing bells in your time here. Maybe even hear them in your sleep. Just curious, how many times does the bell ring during the day here at Stillwater High School?
There's a lot of audio stimulation during the day.
And describe that scene for me. What happens when the bell rings? What happens in the building?
Well, we are a metropolis. We are a small city, for sure. And so during that time, you have some unstructured time, which obviously is healthy for young adults to have some flexible time. Kids have 7 minutes to get from class to class, and so that gives them a little bit of time to kind of decompress from the class that they're just coming from. Chance to socialize with friends. Most students take a vast majority of that 7 minutes, and actually that's something that we actually incorporated a couple extra minutes a couple of years ago just to try to give kids a little bit of a breather and just to add a little bit of mental health relief because in the absence of that, when kids only had 5 minutes or even 6 minutes to get from one class to another, again, Stillwater High School is a big place. So if you have a student who maybe has a math class and then they have to go all the way down to a health classroom or something like that, that's a long way to go, and it just didn't allow them an opportunity to be real social. And that, I think, was contributing to just a feeling that kids had of being really, really stressed out during the day. And with the current schedule that we have with 6 class periods, that's one of the higher class period schedules that high schools would run. And so all of that just kind of contributed to a sense of go, 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 and really high pace for students.
I can only imagine the logistics of trying to pull together a schedule for 2,800 kids. There's obviously a lot about a schedule that's important, but why does it matter? I mean, how does it really impact kids in learning, the schedule of the day?
Well, I would say, your schedule is a vehicle that allows for opportunities. And so the question kind of becomes, what kinds of opportunities do you value, and what do you want to stand for, and what kinds of opportunities do you want to make sure that you provide for students? Again, with the current schedule that we have in a 6-period day, students have a number of requirements. So they have required classes that are needed in order to graduate. And right off the top of your head, there's probably 4 classes that every student is going to be required to take most years that they're here in high school. They're going to be required to take English, they're going to be required to take social studies, they're going to be required to take math, and required to take science. And so that right off the bat fills up 4 out of the 6 classes that a student has on their schedule. For students who kind of have their pathway figured out, if they're going to a 4-year college, if their university requires a world language, boom, that almost, even though it's technically an elective, kind of functions as a de facto required class. And then if you have a student that's interested in music and wants music to be a part of their experience, then boom, their schedule gets pretty well set. And so that's how a lot of that stuff gets impacted in. And that's where ultimately you just have to start asking questions about what kinds of opportunities do our students have, and do they have the opportunities for all the things that they want?
As a parent of a student who was in music all 4 years of high school, I can relate to that as a parent trying to sit there and navigate a registration guide and feeling like my student had very few opportunities. And, he was in a way forced to, drop that world language as soon as he could if he wanted to have any elective experiences in the high school. So that really resonates with me as a parent in terms of the, opportunities available, but having that limited access. I think as a teacher, this is probably one of the most innovative opportunities we've had in a very long time. I think about our, from the pathways lens, when we sit down and work with staff who have this great idea for a new course, and we work alongside that staff member to develop the course and propose it, and it gets approved. We run in the registration guide, and it just is really challenging to get liftoff because our kids only have a finite amount of elective spaces in their schedule. And so seeing new things come to fruition is really challenging. And so I look at either one of these schedule opportunities and think about what could be with new courses and new, more contemporary experiences for kids that we can't currently offer in our schedule. I think about Wyzetta offering an AI course, or computer science, or gaming, or culinary arts, or some of those pieces that our workforce is saying we need and our schools currently can't offer because kids don't have the opportunity to take them.
Rachel, you work with kids every day, both as a teacher and as a coordinator of our Pathways program, which is really about trying to give kids those opportunities and experiences before they go on to the real world. What do you see as challenges with our current schedule?
Well, as Rob just mentioned, when students only have 6 or 12 elective opportunities a year, sometimes the soonest they will ever be able to get to try an elective is their junior year, especially if they are taking their health or their PE on top of their music and world language. And so we do see a lot of kids, they might get a few electives in before they graduate, but not the depth that we would hope for our graduates upon heading off to whatever their next step is. And so we get a lot of students taking introductory level electives, but the amount of students who are able to take multiple electives in sequence isn't as high as some comparative high schools.
Why are electives important?
I think they build those college and career readiness skills for our students. We call them profession-based learning skills. And so all of our career tech ed, CTE courses have those embedded in there. And so you learn a lot of rich skills in your core classes, but those elective courses allow you to do a lot of those application-based skills that students will see when they head out into the workforce. And so if the first time you're able to take a business class as a freshman in college, you've not had a lot of depth and experience in that. And so we see kids potentially switching majors or making educational decisions based on not a lot of experience at the high school level.
I've paged through your registration guide, and it's quite impressive. There are a lot of elective courses. Any idea how many we have here, or some examples of some of the really cool ones that you think are unique to our school?
I don't have a quantifiable number for you off the top of my head, no. But one thing that I would highlight is something that Rachel just kind of addressed earlier, which is the idea that in each of the areas, as you know, Carissa, we made a real concerted effort a couple of years ago to align all of our course offerings around 4 pathways. So we have 4 areas that our curricular offerings are designed to be structured around. And within those 4 areas, the idea really is that you've got a rich array of offerings for students, ranging from a very introductory level to a kind of intermediate level to a more advanced level, so that a student can say, if they really wanted an experience in, say, business or, say, communications, we've got a pathway that allows students to progress from, again, an introductory level to a more intermediate level to a more advanced level. And all of those things were aligned when we chose them. They're aligned with Minnesota Department of Labor, and they're also aligned with a lot of our higher ed partners, so that we're sure that if students do complete that pathway or that progression through one of their elective areas, that they're really set up for what they would need once they get into higher ed. So again, you don't want, as Rachel said, it's a problem when you have a student who decides maybe they want to go to the University of Minnesota and they're going to go to the Carlson School of Management, but they've only had an opportunity to try one business class in high school, or maybe no business classes in high school, because then they're really making a bigger leap of faith. And it would be nice to be able to say with more confidence that students coming out know what they're signing up for. They've had some experience and some exposure to things that really are aligned with what they know they're going to want at that next level. And so that's the piece where, again, the number of elective offerings that students have becomes important, because, as Rachel said, if you don't get into some of those electives until grade 11 or grade 12, and you only have one opportunity here this semester or one opportunity this year, it may not allow students the opportunity to really get an in-depth experience in something that they want to try to see if that's what they want to do.
So that's really the challenge we have here, is we have these great electives, we have this wonderful Pathways program that's designed to give kids these experiences and let them try things out, but there's no time in the schedule for them to do that.
That's pretty spot on.
So let's talk a little bit about changing a schedule. Another thing that I've heard a lot about, and you even mentioned in an earlier question, was mental health, the stress and the anxiety that our kids feel. They have 6 classes they're trying to keep up with every day, 7 minutes to run across the building. Are there other options of schedules that kind of slow the pace down for kids?
There are, and that's part of what we've looked at over the course of the past couple of weeks. We took a team of about 12 staff members who represented all kinds of different curricular areas and different curricular programs, and we also included 4 students. There are some schools who will run different schedules where one example would be like a block schedule or what's called a 4x4. In a 4x4 schedule, there's 4 classes that are offered. Each class period is longer. So right now, our current class periods are about 53 minutes. On a block schedule or a 4x4, each class period is about 85 minutes, so not quite double what our class periods are now, but that reduces the number of transitions because, again, then each student only has 4 classes to juggle at one time. There's fewer transitions, there's fewer passing times.
Fewer bells ringing.
Fewer bells ringing, exactly.
I think from a teacher's perspective, what it would allow us to do is instead of maybe starting a lesson on Monday, stopping midway, picking it up, having to do all that review or relearning, and then finish the following day, you would have more time to go in depth with your students. So maybe longer excerpts of reading or a more in-depth or rich discussion, for example. Science, you could complete the whole lab within a class period instead of dividing it out over 2 class periods. But the piece that we heard from students in the 2 schools that we visited was the amount of time embedded in the class to slow down. Instead of rushing through a lesson and then sending work home with students, you were able to get your homework done with a teacher right alongside you. And students really appreciated that slowing down. So from a mental health perspective, they had fewer transitions, as Rob mentioned, but they had more time in their day to get the work done. If they had a question, their teacher was right there beside them instead of having to guess at home.
Well, that sounds great, but I'm guessing there's a downside to a 4x4. What would the downside to a schedule like that be if they have 4 quarters with different courses each quarter?
Well, one perceived side to that is some students and families are concerned over the idea that there might be gaps then. So if a student, say, were to be enrolled in a math class, say first quarter and second quarter, each year-long class now essentially gets condensed down to a semester, and a semester course or a current semester course would get condensed down to a quarter. And so it's conceivable that a year-long class, like say your Algebra 3 class, might meet during quarter 1 and quarter 2. And then if a student wanted to take pre-calculus or the next course in the sequence the following year, they might not get that until quarter 3 and quarter 4 of the following year. So there's potential for a big gap in some of that foundational instruction. The reality is, in looking at some of the research and in talking to the schools that employ this model, that's more a perceived concern than an actual concern. The schools that we talked to, their teachers were really confident that they were able to get their kids back up to speed relatively quickly. So it wasn't an issue in, say, like your world language classes or your math classes. And in fact, one of the other opportunities that presents itself on a schedule like that is the opportunity for students to double up and accelerate. And so what a lot of students were doing is not only were they taking math during quarter 1 and quarter 2, but then they were taking a whole another year of math in quarter 3 and quarter 4. And they were actually able to get 2 years of math out of the way in 1 year. And that accelerated them all the way through to the point where, again, at Wayzata High School, one of the schools that we visited, they wound up adding courses to their curriculum because they needed them, because kids had exhausted their math curriculum so quickly they needed additional courses. So courses that kids don't normally take until freshman year, sophomore year in college, they were now actually getting in high school too.
So my understanding is a 4x4 would give kids the most opportunities. Are there other schedules you've looked at, though, that maybe don't go quite to that extreme, but still use some creative scheduling to give more opportunities than what we currently have?
Yeah, one of the schools that we visited in the metro area was Edina High School. And so they're employing some of the same principles as Wayzata in terms of longer class periods on that block. But what they're doing is they're taking 7 class periods over two days. And so what that allows them to do is have students year long, instead of just a quarter or a semester, which a traditional 4x4 would look like. And they also have built in, they call it kind of an advisory model. They have their own name for that, as well as kind of a flex period. So to your point about Pathways opportunities, right now Pathways continually competes with office hours. If you had a separate period within your schedule, it would allow students opportunities to do some enrichment, whether it be peer tutoring or internships or job shadowing. And so you'd still get those longer class periods, kids would get more electives. Students would be juggling 7 periods a day, but it would be over a 2-day period.
So are there certain schedule types that you think just work better for the learning needs of our kids or the academic goals that we have as a school?
Well, I would say that, again, the most important thing is going to be the belief system that your teachers and your students have. And they have to understand why this presents better opportunities and why this might potentially be better. When we talked at the onset about the idea of the possibility of a schedule change, we determined collectively as a staff that if we were going to change the schedule, there were 3 primary goals that we would want to address. Number 1, obviously, is the issue of electives, as we've discussed. Number 2 was the idea of student mental health and staff mental health. If there is a way to address that and kind of calm things down for both students and staff, that would be a noble end. The last thing, Rachel mentioned office hours, and office hours is kind of a more flexible time where students actually have some control over how they spend their time and have the ability to pick and choose where they need to go to get some targeted help and some targeted instruction. Those were the 3 areas that we wanted to address. And at the end of the day, those are the 3 things that we measure all of the schedules up against. So every schedule, as we kind of analyze it, look at it, consider it, weigh out some pros and cons, are kind of done around those 3 tenets. And would each of these schedules serve as a good vehicle to allow us to be able to do that? And that's the question that we're kind of trying to get to the bottom of as we go through the process.
And so the next process then is getting staff and student feedback, again, comparing that to what our goals are and looking at a recommendation.
What are you really hoping come out of these conversations, and what are your goals personally that you want to see happen if we were able to get a different schedule?
Well, if we were able to get a different schedule, again, I view this as an opportunity. Again, my primary concern, I'll never forget, and this is a true story, but I'll never forget the student that came up to me one time and told me that, yeah, Mr. Bach, I want to go to the University of Minnesota and I'm going to major in business. And I did not have an opportunity to take a business class in high school. That's a problem. And so I view this as an opportunity to loosen things up for our students. I view it as an opportunity to address some of the needs that we're seeing our students have as they come in and present some of the issues around mental health and just being able to slow things down. And I also view it as an opportunity potentially to up the ante with regard to student learning. You know, one of the things that some of these longer class periods offer too is the opportunity to go really in depth. And the schools that are on schedules that have some of those longer class periods really wouldn't trade it for anything. One of the opportunities really that it gives you as a teacher is it gives you the opportunity to incorporate multiple segments into your class. As teachers, we talk about differentiating all the time, right? We have some kids that respond well to a lecture style format. Some kids respond well to hands-on activities. Some kids respond well to discussion. In a longer class period, you have the opportunity to incorporate all of those types of segments literally every day. And you simply don't have the ability to incorporate all of those transitions into a class period on a 6-period day and do that in 50 minutes. You're kind of picking or choosing 1 or 2 of those. And students don't always have the opportunity to have their learning styles addressed then within every single one of those. And, it's important too, I mentioned that most of the teachers that we've talked to that are teaching on that schedule wouldn't trade it for anything. It's maybe more important or more telling to note that the students that we talk to also wouldn't trade that for anything.
I really liked it. I felt like it went more into depth with the classes, and then students had more time to work on homework in school, so they didn't have any homework after school.
There was a lot of time to really ask questions, so everyone kind of knew what was going on, and I felt like it was less stressful and chaotic because I feel like the hour right now is so fast and so many people during work time are asking questions and it's hard for the teacher to get around. So I felt like he could kind of check in with everyone and make sure everyone was kind of understanding the material.
So what is the process? Tell me a little bit about what's happening. Your staff, it sounds like, has visited some schools and had some conversations. What happens next?
So we looked at kind of our current state, identified, what's working and where, if we had an opportunity, what would we like to solve for students? From there, we looked at those goals and came up with multiple other criteria that we would want to weigh. For example, how would bar fit into the program? How about external programs like PSEO, number of transitions within a day? So we looked at a lot of different sub-criteria to develop a rubric that would be kind of a consistent tool that we would use to help us understand numerically the value of each schedule, or how that schedule would be able to be implemented here. And so in our site visits, we use that rubric tool for the other schedules, but we also did it for our own schedule as well, just to see where we measured up in a variety of different areas. From there, our team looked at research, and so we divided out our 4 subgroups among our leadership team, looked at a variety of local and national research to help understand, does research point to any specific schedule? And I think what we learned is there's no one schedule that shows academic performance exceeding anything else. And so it really goes back to, what are your values and priorities within your building? And then even understanding even a traditional 4x4 or 6x2, how can you customize that for the learning needs within your own building?
We've been hearing those bells ring for a long time, and the schedules have looked very similar to when I was in school way back when. So it's exciting to hear about some opportunities to do things differently, to be flexible, to adapt, and to give our kids more opportunities. So I'm excited for what's maybe ahead here and can't wait to learn more. Any closing thoughts that you want to share?
I appreciate the question that you asked earlier just about the process that we've gone through, and that's something that I'm particularly proud of too, because I do feel like, as Rachel said, we've done a lot of homework, and we have engaged a lot of people in the discussion, and now it's time to start engaging our student body and our families a little bit in the discussion, so that people are up to speed and aware of what is potentially on the table and what those opportunities are. Get some feedback from our other constituents and our other stakeholders around what they want to see potentially in a schedule, and use that to help guide us in terms of trying to make a good recommendation that does best for kids.
Well, that's a great segue. I was just going to give a web address for people who want to learn more about this. They can go to stillwaterschools.org/schedule. They can see some of the things we've talked about with the various schedule models and offer their own feedback as well. So thank you both for your time today. Who knew there was so much philosophy and strategy behind all those ringing bells?
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks. If you enjoyed this episode of Pony Voices, please share it with your friends and neighbors. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast to make sure you never miss an episode. Until next time, go Ponies! STILH2O!